What's up, everybody? This is Alexis, and you're listening to the Power2B Show podcast. When the worship service is over, what do? Many of us go to church every week, and some go periodically, but worship is not a one-day event. It's in everything you do, including while working throughout the week. On the Power2B Show, we are showing people every week the impact of recognizing how God impacts every aspect of your life. Dive in each week as Dr. Byrd, who was both a pastor and professor, chats with various entrepreneurs and leaders in the community. This week, we have Pastor Maurice Johnson, lead pastor of Roanoke Baptist Church here in West Palm Beach. He is not only a pastor, but also a husband, recently celebrating 21 years of marriage, and the father of 3. Before I turn it over to the host, I'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, Roanoke Baptist Church, located at 1320 Douglas Avenue, West Palm Beach, Florida, 33401. And their worship service starts at 10 a.m. every Sunday. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a comment on the episode, and share with your circle. If you want to take it a step further and become a sponsor, send us a message. We all have the power to be. Now here is our host, Dr. Terrell Byrd. Welcome to another episode of the Power2B Show.
Be creative, be connected, and be courageous. Worship does not stop on Sunday. Now, if you were going to give advice that you would say a business owner must do this to succeed. Listeners, I hope that you have been blessed, even as I have, with what we've heard.
Thank you, Alexis. We are just delighted to be back again for another episode of Power2B. I'm really excited tonight because we have one of my former students, and to be able to see him matriculate and do so well in the program of academic and growing not only intellectually but spiritually. And so I am just happy to welcome Maurice Johnson, Pastor Maurice Johnson, to the Power2B Show. It's good to have you, and it's good to see you.
Thank you, Dr. Byrd, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's so good to have you. Look, what I've been doing with most of my guests is talking to them about the work in which not only they do, but their congregants do, and how God informs them in the work they do. So in other words, I talk about the integration of faith and work. Mm-hmm. But I have been of lately focused on talking to pastors about their journey, because it's always intriguing to me to hear pastors tell their story from whence they've come. Now, I know God has laid his hands on you, so that's the first thing.
Exactly, yes.
But that's the first thing.
Hopefully.
Yeah. But what I'd like to do is to introduce you to our audience who are listening in and watching, and tell them who Maurice Johnson is. So talk a little bit about your upbringing, where you come from, and then we'll jump into the ministry part of it.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I'm Maurice Johnson, of course. Mm-hmm. I'm a product of the West Palm Beach area, a native son. Mm-hmm. I matriculated through the school system here in Palm Beach County, Roosevelt Elementary School, Roosevelt Junior High, Palm Beach Lakes High School. I'm just all Mr. Palm Beach.
You are Mr. Palm Beach.
Yeah. Tried to leave here at one time after high school to go on to college, and had to return for medical reasons with my grandmother. Okay. And so stayed Mr. Palm Beach because I matriculated in higher learning at Palm Beach Atlantic University. Got my undergrad there several years ago, and then recently finished my graduate work with my Master of Divinity.
Yeah. Well, I'm just excited about the fact that you have made not only this your home, but you have been able to impact the place where you're from. And it's one thing to grow up here. You know, a lot of times people grow up and they got to get out.
Get out and get gone.
That's right. But for you to be able to plant yourself here and then make a difference doing what God has called you to do in this place. One of the things that I'd like to talk about is in your work as a young man growing up in West Palm Beach, what was it about this area that perhaps may have shaped you or moved you in the direction of your faith? What was it about? Was it your upbringing? Do your parents or what was it the environment like for you here?
Well, I'm fourth generation.
Okay.
Here in West Palm. So we have deep roots here.
Wow.
The sense of community.
Okay.
My grandmother's contemporaries were people like Mrs. Louise Bowie, who was a champion for civil rights. Actually, she's my godmother.
Okay.
She's passed on, but she was also a member of our church, the church that I pastor now. Educators like Mr. U.B. Kinsey.
Okay.
So those were the role models, so to speak, that I saw.
Yeah.
But the thing was, they were not just community leaders. They were also leaders in their churches.
Okay.
And so church was at the center of the Black community during those days. Just about, well, even now, there's a church on every corner.
Yeah.
But we had what were neighborhood churches. Where I grew up, I could stand in the living room window and see the lights on at my home church.
Yeah.
So I always saw my pastor coming and going.
Okay.
During the day, during the evening. My family home is basically sandwiched between my home church and the church I pastor now.
Okay.
13th and 14th Street. And so there was not a lot of activity. We grew up in church. A lot of us developed gifts that we had.
Right.
Through church.
Through church. Yeah.
Singing in the choir has produced, a lot of our known popular singers even now.
Yeah.
And so church was just at the heart of it. That's what we did.
Yeah.
We went to school during the week.
Yeah.
And we went to church on the weekend.
Right. I think it's fascinating to me as I hear you talk about those sages, those older members that poured into you. So I know that it was also during a time, because I know a little bit of the history of West Palm Beach and Palm Beach, that race played a tremendous factor. So the odds were against most people of color during that time.
Certainly.
So to have people who are interested in education pouring into you, you mentioned some, and was it that their example, you said you watched them, you watched the pastor coming and going to church, it had to be a kind of inspiration to you, or, what did that mean to you, watching these sages? Particularly during a time when there was so much against them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was the inspiration.
Okay.
To see them excel amidst all the challenges and against a lot of opposition. And to hear the stories. I often say I was blessed to not be raised by my mother's generation. She would have been the recipient of the progress made through the civil rights struggle.
Okay.
But I was raised by the generation who went through the civil rights struggle.
Okay.
As I mentioned, Mrs. Bowie
and
Mr. Kinsey.
Yeah.
He was responsible for bringing Thurgood Marshall here to, deal with some legal issues with Black teachers getting equal pay. And so to even hear those stories,
right.
that I know people who actually
Yeah,
knew
you know
Thurgood
people
Marshall
who
you know.
lived
Yeah.
the civil rights.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And Mrs. Bowie was the NAACP president for like 30 years.
Wow.
From the 50s into the 80s.
Yeah.
And I would hear her talk about Harry T. Moore and his wife, and they would sit at her dinner table.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
and these are civil rights icons. Nelson T. Smith, out of Alabama.
Yeah.
He was known to come to the Roanoke Church and preach revival because my predecessor, L.J. Alford, was a champion for civil rights here in West Palm also.
Okay.
He led a lot of movements to integrate the lunch counters. So I grew up with that social justice kind of mantra.
Yeah.
And so,
and a lot of history. I mean, not only those people, but those churches. I mean, I know Tabernacle
was one.
Yeah.
During those days, Dr. Johnny K. Bryant was there.
Okay.
He was a two-term pastor.
Two-term,
Yeah.
huh?
He left and came back with some more.
God bless his soul.
Yeah. There's a star in heaven for him.
Yeah. But so some of the older and historical, I know Tabernacle's a historical. Now, Roanoke, is that the mother church of another church, or had it come out of another church? Because many of these churches were
Most
born.
of them did.
Yeah, okay.
As far as we know, Roanoke did not come from a particular church. There were a couple of families that moved into the area.
Okay.
And they were churchmen. They were known builders of churches and organizers. Okay. Now, the church was organized. We will be celebrating our centennial next year.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Been around, bro.
Yeah. So I think the mother churches here would be Tabernacle and Payne Chapel.
Yeah.
They're both about 130.
Yeah. I did a preaching for Tabernacle's 129 or something like that. 129th anniversary.
They're coming up on 130.
Yeah.
So basically, they were there, and about 30 years later, we came along. But that we have a church that was birthed out of ours, which is the Mount Calvary Church here, Bishop W.O.J. Granger.
Calvary came out of Roanoke.
Yes,
I was not aware of that.
Back in '57.
Wow. So tell me the name Roanoke. Was that named after?
We do not know. We've been trying to figure out, where'd the name come? Did somebody live in Roanoke, Virginia? Or what?
Right, because of Virginia, I know Roanoke.
We've never gotten an answer. There are one or two other Roanoke Baptist churches.
Okay.
There's one in Texas.
Okay.
There's a First Baptist of Roanoke, Virginia.
Okay.
But it's
that's always kind of curious about the naming of churches, because in the black community is either first, second, third Baptist, greater. Everything's greater.
First Baptist. Yes.
Yeah. Well, interesting. So you grew up in this community. You had a kind of a window into the life of the community, watching people in their work. Let me ask you something, because I'm so interested in how particularly African Americans have sustained their life through work. Mm-hmm. And the entrepreneurial spirit. And so do you remember Black businesses in this community, and what were they like? How were they?
It was starting to decline as I was growing up, but we do remember those. I do. We had neighborhood stores, neighborhood grocery stores, just on the block that I lived. My grandparents were both entrepreneurs. My grandmother ran a daycare, and my grandfather, he was a professional fisherman, and he had his own fish market, so he would bring his wares, and he had an area where he could actually cook it. If someone came and said, I want whatever, he would cook and
he'd
do
lay it
what
on
he,
and put it together.
yeah. And I even have some skills in the kitchen. But we were self-sufficient.
Okay.
All of the seamstresses and tailors that I knew growing up, they looked like me, and I looked like them. We were very good friends with the Coleman family of Coleman's Funeral Home.
Yeah.
Giselle Coleman and my mother, they attended the same schools. I grew up with her son. We're classmates. And of course, the late Edith Coleman, who just passed a few months ago, she was like everybody's grandmother.
Wow.
We knew her. Either she taught you at, well, it was Palmview Elementary then, but UB Kenzie Palmview Elementary, or you just knew her through her grandson.
Wow.
And we saw that. We saw the self-sufficiency of the Black community. There's a push to try and bring that renaissance.
Yeah.
And I'm praying and I want to be involved with it. Where we get to the place where we are investing in ourselves again.
Yeah. I think that was a wonderful time when you saw that kind of spirit in people. And the question is, what happened? And why was there such a move away from that? I don't know if you have some thought about that.
It's pretty much been the same story across the country, gentrification. I can remember growing up being on 4th and Rosemary before the Grand Theater was torn down. I remember barbers on 4th and Rosemary. I got my hair cut where Attorney Boysaw's office is. One side was the barbershop. The other side was the store. Okay. And so everybody had their thing.
So
they specialized
Black ownership was very much a part of that then. The property, the land.
And a lot of the property and land stayed with the families.
Okay.
I mentioned Attorney Brian Boysaw. That property was in the family. His father-in-law's mother owned the store.
Wow.
Next to the barbershop.
Okay.
She owned the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so I remember going to get my hair cut by Mr. Suarez. And, as a kid, you go next door and get your fill on candy and cookies and whatever else, fall asleep, wake up. Is it my turn yet? No, fall back asleep.
Right.
But we saw that. We even had police officers that we knew on a personal level. Right. Late Jules Herring and Officer Wells. We knew them.
You
by
knew
name.
person you had relations. So it's this relationships that were a part of the community, and that's gentrification and redlining in some areas and things like that. I think have impacted not only the Black community, but more importantly, the Black family. And when I hear you say that a lot of these businesses were family owned,
definitely,
and then passed down generationally, so that kind of brings me to the next point. So the one is, I know that you had a lot of people that inspired you. You started in the church when? Talk to me a little bit about your relationship to the church.
The joke is I was almost born in the back door of the church.
Oh, wow.
My mother, after I was born, she carried me to the Union Baptist Church. And after her passing, I was still going. I was a little baby. My godmother would take me to church. And because my grandmother was a member of another church, I would go with her often. But I fell in love with the Union Baptist Church. At that time.
Who was the pastor at that time?
Reverend I.S. Clark.
Clark was
Isaiah S. Clark. Yes. He just retired last year, but he had been there since 68.
Okay.
Yeah. And a young man. When I came along, I got him in his prime.
Yeah,
got him in his prime.
And my producer told me to turn off my phone, and I thought I had. So
we preachers don't listen.
We don't listen. That's right, we're hard-headed. So Clark has just retired.
Just retired.
But so you were there to kind of just be with him, and you grew with him. And
Yeah, I did. I grew up in the church. Like I said, I lived only 3 houses down from the church.
Uh-huh.
So I was that kid that when the funeral home came to put a body in, I ran up with the key, and would unlock the door and let them in and what have you.
Uh-huh.
So I would get to interact with folk and meet different people. But he had this sense about him when it came to children. He was very cutting edge and very bold about it. He would put young people, I mean, when I say young, I'm talking about teenagers, in key positions in church.
So he would just say, put you out there.
Yeah. And it was unheard of. And it wasn't that he didn't have other choices. There were plenty of adults around.
Okay.
But it was his way of grooming and discipling us. I didn't understand that then. But now that I sit back at 47 and realize that I was on the finance committee counting the offerings and the tithes at 12 years old.
Wow.
It groomed me to a point that I saw everything that goes on in church.
Wow.
And so.
Yeah, some of the scholars who have written about the Black church have often talked about the church giving Blacks an opportunity to be able to use their gifts.
Yes.
At a young age.
It's an incubator.
Yeah. That doesn't happen in our counterparts. It does not happen in the majority culture where they don't have that kind of experience at such a young age.
Yes.
So, and look at as we talked a little bit about the singers that have come out of the church who have gone on to have stellar careers in the secular world. So, but even being able to get up in front of people and talk,
Right. We learn leadership there.
Yeah.
I can recall the days of the junior deacon.
Yeah.
I'm dating myself.
I was one. Yeah.
I skipped that part because I started preaching early. But I was in line to be one. Right. But
you got elevated real soon.
Yes.
Right? So how old were you when you started preaching?
I announced my call at 13 during the summer of '89.
Wow.
But my pastor, being the intellectual that he is, he was not going to have me have my initial sermon without some proper training. And so at that time, we had courses that were underwritten by Morehouse at the church. And so I'm a freshman in high school by day, Bible college student by night. So it's always been a part of me.
Yeah. Which is good. I mean, the fact that your pastor not only said, okay, I know you have a gift, and that's the other thing, that to be able to recognize giftedness.
Yes.
But then knowing that iron sharpens iron. So you've got to sharpen. You may have the gift, but you need to have something that can help you be able to strengthen what that gift is. And for them to be able to give that to you, because sometimes people don't, they say, oh yeah, he's got a gift, he's going to be all right.
Yeah,
to see that
it needs to be fostered.
Yeah.
It has to be nurtured.
Yeah.
And I don't take for granted the time and the love that was poured into me by my pastor. I am who I am to this day because of God and he.
Yeah.
I am.
I can appreciate that. I had a similar pastor, and it means so much when you have that kind of elder leadership and that elder statesman that you can look and watch how they do things.
Yes.
So you're preaching at a young, you were still wet behind your ears.
Right. He's going to do what?
Yeah. But the impact that must have had on other young people your age too, that had to be a wonderful thing, because I'm sure young people draw young people.
Exactly.
That's how it works. And so I'm sure your church was blessed by that, to have youth to come in through that as a result of you. Yeah.
Now, I didn't really think I was making that much of an impact then. But years later, hearing it, as a matter of fact, today we normally have our noonday prayer and praise on Wednesdays. And one of our members said to me, I know a childhood friend of yours. I said, oh, really? And she started talking, and she said she happened to be telling him the church she was a member of and who her pastor was. And he says, oh, that's nothing new. We knew he was going to be a preacher when he was 2.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
But
yeah,
it's
well,
just been
hey, you know, and when you start young, I always tell people, a lot of my friends I went to school with, I said I started young. You know, I was preaching at 17. I was pastoring at 22.
Yeah.
You know, and they said, well, you're youth. And I said, yeah, but it was more time for God to be able to use me.
Yes.
And as a result of that, God has blessed the years following. Many of the ones that were rejecting the church when I was growing up came to me and asked for advice and actually gave their life to the Lord later on in life.
Yes.
But I think about all the years that were wasted, but that they could have been given to the Lord. Yeah. So I'm so refreshing to hear how you came to the Lord at such a young age.
I love that. I actually accepted Christ. I was 5 years old. Some say, oh, you don't know what you're doing at that time. No, there are levels to it, of course, but a basic understanding of salvation.
Yeah.
When you are properly taught, it can be grasped at some very early ages.
Yeah.
Accepted Christ at 5, preached my first sermon at 14, pastored my first church and the church I'm at right now at 25.
Yeah.
I just celebrated 21 years.
Wow. Well, 2
congratulations
weeks ago. On
Thank you.
that too. So now I got into that part. That's the fun part, talking about you. So tell me about the greatest challenges that have been, what have you kind of thought may have been the greatest challenge to being in ministry?
Greatest challenge to ministry, and I have to contextualize it to where I am now. Being as young at 25 years old, and you know, with you pastoring at 22, I know you'll be able to appreciate what I'm about to say. This little boy is going to tell us what? You know?
Yeah, right.
I had several members of the church that I'm pastoring who taught me in school. So the roles were reversed.
Sure, yeah.
And I really thought I would have the most resistance from some of them, but it came from some other areas.
Yeah.
But that is the challenge.
That is a
because
challenge.
you come in,
you're
gung-ho, you have all these fresh ideas. And some of those ideas, you still have them.
Yeah.
They never came to fruition, but you have them.
Yeah, I never forget a lady named Sister Gooch in my church, Sister Gooch, and she said, I changed your diapers.
They will remind you.
Yeah.
They will remind you.
Yeah. So, I guess that would be, What other might be challenges in ministry?
The challenge of academics.
Okay.
It's not as popular.
Okay.
I guess would be the best term.
So what you're saying is not just the fact that of you actually going to school, but it's the perception that the church has about academics?
Yes. It almost seems as if you're less spiritual if you get it.
Yeah. Okay.
And especially from an accredited university.
Yeah.
There's a big
so
difference.
There's a distinction?
Oh, yeah.
You mean to tell me that there's a distinction between?
I told the congregants Sunday, I said, this did not come from a diploma mill.
Right.
I had to work for this.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
There is a difference in the quality of learning and education. But so you're saying that in many cases, there's a lack of an appreciation.
Yes.
For
I know
that
you've heard the
level.
quip.
Yeah.
The play on words, the pun. You're going to cemetery, as opposed to seminary.
Yeah.
And that has its own mentality.
Yeah.
It's almost as you're not on fire.
Yeah,
You've been cooled off.
Yeah, right.
But no, I have more logs now to put on the fire.
That's right.
Yeah,
I
make
remember,
it burn a little brighter.
Yes, sir. I remember someone telling me I had preached at a church, and after I preached, they had talked about my degrees and so forth. And then after the sermon, I preached, and then a lady came to me and she said, "I didn't know you could preach. I knew you were a teacher. I didn't know you could preach."
As if there's really a big difference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So in that tradition, that if you are a called preacher, you really don't need that seminary.
Right.
You can just preach.
Yeah.
So
open your mouth and God will speak for you.
God speak. That's right.
I only known him to tell Moses that, but
Wow. Yeah. So that's a challenge, and that is helping people to understand the value
yes,
of a learned clergy, and all the difference makers that we know historically have been learned men.
Certainly.
So
Dr. Jeremiah Wright,
Dr.
King
Dr.
himself.
King,
yeah. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, W. Wyatt.
Y.T. Walker, yes.
All these who are brilliant minds,
and
Joseph
they have to
Lowry.
shape us.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Samuel DeWitt Proctor.
That's right, Proctor. Yeah, my professor at United. So when we talk about education, let me take it another step. Then in your success, and by the way, congratulations on your achieving your graduate degree, your terminal degree, and Master's of Divinity. What have been some of your greatest successes in ministry?
I would say the greatest success, if we can call it success, but is to see lives transform. And I mean, really see them transform from what you knew they were to what the Lord had them to become.
Yeah.
And are still in the process of becoming.
Yeah.
I've witnessed persons who were drug addicted. And the only program we had at the time was the gospel of Jesus Christ.
All right. Yeah.
And there's power there.
That's transformational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to witness it firsthand, to actually see it living and breathing, I think that's the greatest success. And that's my only purpose for preaching.
Yeah.
To see lives
I think that
transformed.
when we really accept the fact that we are called to make a difference in people's lives, then that is the greatest. What a better reward can there be than that? So in this idea of success also, not only the challenge, but what lessons have you learned through the process?
I have been taught patience.
Okay.
If you don't have any, you will.
Okay.
And one of the things I really use as a barometer when challenges come, not every hill you get to is Calvary.
Okay. All right.
So not every hill is worth dying on.
That's right. So you got to choose.
Some things you got to choose your battles carefully.
Yeah. Carefully.
Yeah.
So patience. Yeah. What other? Is there other lessons? Patience is a great virtue. Yes.
A lot of being able to see. Well, we talked about lives transformed, but even see generations. We have a generational church. There are great-grandparents in the same building with their great-grandchildren.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And all the generations between.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. That's rare today.
Yeah.
Particularly in the Black church.
That used to be our thing. That's
right.
what happened.
Yeah. So you could give some advice to some pastors who are saying, "But I've lost my young people." Then what is it that has kept the young people coming to your church?
We're limping with this pandemic, of course, But what I've noticed is that it's almost a each one, reach one type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get the family together,
Yeah.
usually if you can convince the father, if the father's present, whomever the head of that house is, if you can convince them,
the others will
that there's a need for Christ, they'll bring their children.
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side happens too. If you have a viable program for the children, they'll bring their friends who are unchurched. They'll eventually bring their parents because they want to see what is going on with my child, because I'm seeing a difference. This is the same child that I couldn't get to listen in the house.
Right. Yeah.
Now all of a sudden they want to wash dishes.
Right.
What happened? And when?
Right. Well, but that does bring me to this question of the millennial generation age that we're in. Do you think that they see church differently than the generation, the boomers and the busters? And how does that impact the way you pastor?
Well, that generation, from what I've experienced, they are the generation that seeks authenticity. That generation
keep it real.
They they can detect a fraud 3 miles away.
Yeah.
And my generation, they call us the Generation X. We were the ones who coined the phrase, keep it real. And those generations that have come behind us have all done the same thing. And I think when you are reasonably transparent, you don't need to tell everything, but when you're reasonably transparent in the pulpit, people tend to see you as being a real human being.
Right.
Rather than this person in this ivory tower.
Yeah.
Because, how we are with black pastors and what have you in our churches, we put pastors on pedestals. And anything you put up, the law of gravity says, if it goes up, it can come down.
Yeah.
And
so this kind of bifurcation between pastor and people.
Right. Yeah. They need to know you're just as human, but you don't have to show your whole human side.
Yeah.
But when they understand that we have the same kind of ills, we go through the same problems.
Sure.
We have issues financially and otherwise.
Sure.
It's not like we preach on Sunday and by the end of Sunday, after Sunday dinner, the chariot comes down from heaven, scoops us up, takes us back to Eden. No, we live here in the world with everybody else.
That's right. Yeah. So the other, I don't know if it's a challenge, but the thing that I think we may have to also deal with is the older generation, boomers like me and, Xers, although you're not as old, but
thank you.
But how do you help each to interface with one another? And I think because if the older generation said, but we've always done it this way. This is our tradition, and from what I understand, sometimes they're not as easily willing to give up those roles, those positions.
Sometimes, most times. But and I think that's at the peril of the church.
Okay.
Because if a person is, let's say, 65 now, I'm not against people being leaders as long as health allows them to. But if you're 85, you've had 20 years to groom others,
right,
to either take the position you're in or take some other positions. Because the worst thing to happen is that the people, the vanguard who holds down the fort, die abruptly.
Right.
and there's no transition.
Yeah.
It leaves the church bare. It leaves the church vulnerable.
Yeah. In academics, we talk about the loss of institutional knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And institutional knowledge comes with people who've been a part of the institution. So what I hear you saying is that older generation ought to be pouring into
well, they know the ebbs and flows.
Right.
Now, I think that's one of the things that helped me coming into a congregation where the median age was about 70.
Mm.
The previous pastor, I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the line, we developed a grandfather-grandson relationship. And I wasn't a member of the church, but he would bring me to preach often.
Okay.
I had friends who were members, family members there. I had classmates there. So we all knew each other. And he watched me grow up from a child.
Okay.
Because in order for him to get to his parking space at the old building, he had to come up my street.
Okay.
So I'd be out there, 6, 7 years old, just waving, hey, hi, Reverend Alf, But it allowed us to interact a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And as he started waning in years, I would take him to the grocery store because I worked at night while I was in college. And we got to talk a lot. He got to the point where, he would want to go to conventions. I would drive him. And he started pouring in so much.
Wow. Yeah.
And it pertained to Roanoke.
Mm.
And I didn't understand it then because my eyes were not on anybody's church. Because at that time, when I returned to West Palm Beach, I was majoring in elementary education.
Okay.
Church pastoring was the last thing on my mind. But he saw something. And when we would talk, it would be always with the mentality like he was saying, I'm making this transition. I'm telling you this for a reason.
I'm preparing you
right
for your next assignment.
Yes. It was really a grooming.
Yeah. And that's what older generations should do.
Yes.
And so the emphasis, perhaps we as pastors need to really emphasize that part of it even more than we do now. Because it's so much is lost when we don't. So much is lost. So now the other thing is because you have pursued a life of academic endeavor, the challenge of pastoring and going to school and being a father, being community involved, engaged. What has that been like for you?
Acrobatics.
you have
to really be able to keep the balls in the air.
Yeah.
It's a juggling act. Because if you're not careful, something's going to go lacking. If you're able to balance academia, church life, family life, you may be neglecting yourself. Self-care. And that is so important because you can't help someone when you need help yourself, when you're sick, when you're not at optimal levels of health. So something does go lacking if you, and most people don't have that balance. And it's hard to get it. But you have to be intentional.
That's good advice. I was going to ask you, what advice would you give other pastors?
Oh yeah.
And that sounds like
guard your family.
You guard your family.
Yeah, guard your family and guard your heart.
Guard your heart. Okay. Yeah. All right. Good. And so, in that discussion of doing those guarding one's heart, guarding one's family, community engagement. What kind of advice? Because I know you've been involved with the community work and you've been involved with association work with your denomination, the Baptist Church. Right. Tell me something about what do you see the role of a pastor and your involvement in the community?
I think we have to tap back into the old days where we had that prophetic voice. Our communities and even the people we serve in our individual churches, in the Black community, they need someone to champion their cause. They need someone to be bold enough. And I've said this a few times, and I believe I said it on an interview once. The Black pastor probably is one of the most influential in the community because he can say some things. He can speak truth to power and not worry about any kind of economic backlash because he does not get paid by the general establishment or the broader culture.
He's not in a secular job. His church,
if he's full time,
and has a church that can do that.
If he has been blessed to have a church that can afford him a full time salary, he's the one to do it, or she's the one, because I'm not gender biased. But you have that opportunity. It's a privilege, to be able to say, I'm not tied down or loyal to anybody as far as my livelihood. The church takes care of me. It's my job to take care of the people.
Exactly.
As best I can.
And that gives you that prophetic voice to be free.
Nothing
speak
like being able
power,
to be free to speak.
And not have to get permission.
Because, Pharaoh can be something to deal with.
That's right. Those taskmasters. But So that has been, I think, a very beneficial thing to be a pastor, because the independent church, Black church movement, one of the things that we often talk about is that the Black church was the only institution that was complete business, that was completely owned and operated by Blacks themselves. And then that gives them this level of autonomy and independence to be able to do what they want to do. Speaking of that, your church, are there goals that you have set for your congregation, that you are ministries that you're working on right now that you can talk about?
Well, currently, we're reviving a lot of things because, as you know, the pandemic did a lot to churches. Did you all operate
or online only? How did you shut down?
For a little while, we were just online. Last year, in I believe July, we went back to in person, but we're hybrid. We were actually hybrid prior to the pandemic beginning, the early part of the year. So that part wasn't as difficult to navigate, but trying to corral, keep the members together, you're doing something that we didn't have a playbook on. We didn't have a blueprint for this.
You have to become creative.
So, quickly. Because, contrary to popular belief, there's no pot of gold in a Black church.
Right.
So, you miss a couple of weeks of financial support.
The bills keep coming.
Yeah, they keep coming. They don't care that we're out.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. And so what we've been doing, we've been taking our time to do it, but not too much time. We're reviving those ministries that were already there. A lot of our leaders, still around. We've had some to pass on. Some actually fell victim to COVID. But
tragic.
And so that shook the church. These were some very good members, some stalwart persons who, I mean, when I say leaders, they were leaders.
Wow.
And so we've had to kind of navigate through that to try and find the perfect fit, so to speak.
And while you're going through grieving and mourning.
Right. And so we've always been involved with community efforts. We have an outreach ministry. We do feeding. We've partnered with other entities to bring fresh produce to the underserved area. We've done clothing drives, and Christmas time we would give out toys to those who were less fortunate than ourselves.
That's great.
We've been on that.
Yeah, one of the
for a
things
long
that
time.
I've talked, and I like when you said partner with others, because one of the things that I've been really trying to emphasize is the importance of collaboration.
Yes.
That when we
Yes,
can
yes.
find somebody that's also going in the direction that we're going in, let's come together and do it together. And I think this is a good area to be able to do that, isn't it? I mean,
Oh
you
yeah, this
got-
is a
as you say,
it's,
you got
yeah. The
churches-
soil is rich.
Yeah, yeah.
The soil is rich. It really is.
Yeah. Now, talk about some of the roles you've served on through your associational work.
I was actually at 26, 27 years old. I was president of the Baptist Ministers Conference.
Wow.
That was an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even in our denomination here in West Palm Beach alone, I've been pastoring 21 years, but I'm still the baby of the bunch. It's like all this gray hair in my beard, and I'm still the baby of the bunch.
Well, that's why there's
So-
gray hair.
Yeah, that's what brought it on. But yeah, I was leading guys who were in their 60s and 70s, some 80.
Wow. Yeah.
I've also served as moderator of Gold Coast Association, which was an upstart group. We were affiliated with another convention for a while. I have served in leadership capacities in Florida East Coast Baptist Association.
Okay.
Currently, I am the recording secretary for the Florida General Baptist Convention.
Okay.
Dr. C.P. Preston, president
Okay.
of that organization. So I've been busy.
You've had your hands in
I've been
a
busy.
lot,
Yeah.
and you've been serving well. So that's a wonderful thing. And the family, the boys, you have all boys,
Yeah.
and they're growing. What
they're growing.
ages are they?
My oldest is 20. He's in
20-year-old.
his second year of college.
Okay.
My middle son, my oldest Maurice, the second, my middle son, Makai, he is a sophomore at Palm Beach Lakes, my alma mater.
All right.
And the youngest, he's 7, Mason. He'll be 8 next month.
Yeah.
He's a student at UB Kinsey, Palmview Elementary.
Oh, wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful.
so-
Well, I want to have a word of prayer with you, but I want to thank you for sharing with us, because I think it's important that people hear what pastors are dealing with and have their experiences that they can share, that can inspire others who may not see the role of pastor as clearly.
Yes.
You know? Yeah.
It's not for the faint of
It's
heart.
not. It's actually not. But in doing that, I just want to be an encourager to you and to thank you for the work you've done. And again, to congratulate you for staying the course and your academic journey and the difference that you're making in the lives of so many. So let me just pray for you.
Certainly.
And before we dismiss from this place, okay. Eternal God, our Father, we are so grateful for servant leaders, those that you've called, and particularly those who you called even at such a young age, but they have spent their years committed to serving others. Thank you, O God, because the fruit has been obviously bore through the work that Pastor Maurice Johnson is doing. I pray for his family. I pray for his children. I pray that you would put a hedge around them, protect them, keep them safe. And dear Lord, I pray that you would continue to give Maurice the kind of self-help that he needs to be constantly refreshed and revived to do even greater work. We thank you for his presence here today on this show, and we give you the glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Bless you, my brother. And again, thank you for being on the Power2B Show.
I enjoyed myself. Thanks for the invite.
We would like to thank this episode's sponsor, Living Word Christian Community, located at 2390 South Military Trail, West Palm Beach, Florida, 33415, where Dr. Terrell Byrd is the lead pastor. The worship service begins at 10:30 a.m. in person on Facebook and Instagram Live.